Welcome to AppStories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you exclusively by OmniFocus 3 from the Omni Group. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're embarking on a very special journey this week. We've got a very special project that we've been working on for a while that we want to tell everybody about. But before we go into the details, I want to extend a very special thanks to the Omni Group and their app OmniFocus 3 because they're making this whole project possible by sponsoring both AppStories and MacStories for this entire week. And I'm really grateful that they're doing that because it's a great app and I'd love you to check it out.
Yeah, they've been great supporters of our idea for this project, which I want to talk about briefly. So a few months ago, I think actually over the holidays, so in 2017, I had this idea of doing something special for the App Store's 10th anniversary. Now, the App Store is going to turn 10 on July 10th. And when I realized 6 months ago that 2018 would be the 10th anniversary of the App Store, it felt right to try and organize something that would allow us to celebrate the App Store and celebrate developers and apps and try to offer a selection of stories and podcast episodes to tell the stories of the people who make apps and the people who use apps and how much the App Store has impacted our society over the past 10 years. And so after many, many months of planning and writing and talking to people and interviewing people and trying to make our schedules work for time zones and all that,
All right.
starting this week on both MacStories.net and AppStories.net, you will find a daily series of interviews and stories. So there will be, I believe, 6, is that correct, John? 6 AppStories episodes?
There are 6 that will be sandwiched right in between today's episode and next week's episode. So one extra one a day until next Monday.
One episode a day of AppStories. Each episode a different interview with developers and designers, app makers, creators, and folks who we know from the iOS app and game community. Is going to be super fun. And we spend a lot of time doing these interviews and asking questions that we really want to dig deep into the conversation with these folks. And it's been a blast, really. And I'm super excited for people to start listening to these episodes.
We've been recording those episodes now for several weeks, getting ready for this big day. And it's very exciting to have them finally going out. There are going to be, as Federico said, there are going to be 6 extra episodes, but don't feel the pressure that you have to listen to them all at once. These are the kind of things that are somewhat evergreen because they're about the last 10 years of the App Store.
And also on MacStories, we will take a similar approach. There will be, I believe, around 10 stories from Monday to Sunday. So starting today for an entire week, there will be a selection of stories from the entire team. From Ryan, Alex, John, Stephen Aquino, Stephen Hackett, and me. And there will be stories about different aspects of the App Store and app culture and the history of the App Store and the impact of apps on our lives. We've been planning this story again for months. You can expect 1 to 2 stories on the site daily. And there will also be a post with a collection of all the AppStories episodes that will be updated throughout the course of the week so that you can choose to listen in your podcast client, or you can just go to MacStories, find the roundup of all the episodes and listen from the web player, because we have an embeddable player that people can go there and just listen from MacStories. So there will also be a dedicated section, a hub, if you will, on MacStories, so that you will be able to find all of these articles and all of these episodes in a single place. We wanted to celebrate the fact that the App Store has allowed me personally to start MacStories and eventually to grow this team and to have a podcast and to know so many people, which is also the topic that we want to discuss today, the sort of our personal stories about the App Store and apps. But before we jump into the topic, I need to thank John because you've done an amazing job with getting these interviews scheduled and working with developers and designers. So I just need to thank you on the show because you've done an incredible job, and I hope that people will like what we put together.
Well, thanks, Federico. It's been a lot of fun doing it too, and it's always fun when you get to talk to a lot of the people who you write about during the course of the year. So, this is one of those projects too that just felt absolutely perfect for Mac Stories, because this is what Mac Stories is all about. So it's a perfect time to sit back, take stock, put it all in context, and reflect a little bit about what the App Store means both to us individually as the team that is writing for Mac Stories, and then more broadly in the bigger community at large. Okay, so as you said, Federico, we thought we would talk a little bit about what the App Store means to us and some stories behind that. And, I last fall wrote an article on Mac Stories called My App Stories, which was much of the backstory as to how it came to be that I left my job as a lawyer and started working and writing with you on Mac Stories. But there's actually, as with most stories, you can turn the clock back even further. And what really, I think, got me hooked was way back in like 2008 and 2009, at the very beginning of the App Store, because I had my son, Owen, who's 20 now, was 10 when the App Store launched. And he wanted to learn how to code. And he had tried various things that were available online, the kind of editors you'll see that'll work in a web browser. And he was kind of into that. He thought it was kind of cool. But it wasn't until the iPhone SDK came out that it really grabbed him. And I think what really grabbed him was the fact that not only could he build an app on a device he could hold in his hands, but he could give it to other people. He could put it on the App Store and people could download it. So, he was young. I was trying hard to find outlets for him to further this interest in learning how to code. And when the App Store came out, there was nothing. Because there was no documentation. There was an NDA. You couldn't get information about how to do this. The best you could do is read a bunch of books about Mac coding, which is different. There's definitely overlap, but it was hard to get started. And he eventually, after many months, he wasn't there on day one. After many months, he came out with a flashcard app in 2009 called Math Time. And it was super simple. It would display a math problem, it had like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And then you could tap the flashcard and see what the answer was. So you could think in your head what the answer was and then check it. And it's amazing to me the reaction that had in him, because first of all, a couple of things happened. One is because he was so young, when word got out about this, it was mentioned on like MacBreak Weekly in the day at one point, and it spread, and suddenly he was on the local news and being interviewed with people and all this stuff, right? It was I think I still have a clip of the local news video of him sitting in our home talking about his app with his brother, his younger brother, who did some of the design work. But it was his reaction to all that was interesting too, because he realized very quickly that people were more interested in his age than his app. And he did something that I thought was kind of interesting, especially for a kid of his age. He was only 11. He said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to talk to anybody unless they want to talk to me about the code and about my app, because he didn't want to be the personal interest story, the lifestyle story on the local news. He wanted people to talk to him if they thought his code was good. So we stopped talking to the press, and he just kept coding. And he's been doing it for a number of years now. And really his interest in it and trying to help him in figuring out how to get the resources to learn how to do this is what got me into the iPhone, learning how to code myself. That came much later, but I was reading the books and trying to help him out here and there. So I was starting to pick it up a little bit along the way myself. And it's really what got both of us started. He's now 20 at UC Berkeley in California. And, he's learning he's taking computer science. He's going to be a computer engineer. And so it really, it's a story of how the App Store, it's just one example, but I think there are a ton of kids like him who now are just getting through college and are going to be the next programmers. It's a whole generation of programmers that were brought up on the iPhone.
That's amazing. I didn't know this story, especially the local news part. I had no idea that it was this sort of celebrity kid developer. I
It was very strange. Shark
Yeah, I
Tank
can,
got in touch with us at one point too.
seriously. Oh
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
It was a crazy time. And you know what? I'll tell you one little more bit about that, which was I think his app came out in like the beginning of the summer of 2009, and a couple of months later, I started getting messages from all over the internet on Twitter, really, that they had heard about Owen's app on the radio. It turns out that Rush Limbaugh, who I'm not a fan of, Rush Limbaugh, who is also a very much an Apple fan, had found his app, I think through MacBreak Weekly, and was making a point, something about innovation in America and how, the Obama administration didn't have to incentivize innovation because there was lots of innovation. And here's an example. And he talked about Owen's app and linked it. The sales blew up. It was crazy. That was the height of the celebrity part of it.
That's just amazing. I love these stories.
Thanks to OmniFocus 3 for iOS for supporting AppStories this week. OmniFocus 3 is a fresh major update to the app that's been the trusted gold standard to-do app for 10 years. That's right, 10 whole years. OmniFocus has been on the App Store since day one. Download it for free and put it through its paces for 14 days. It's a free trial, and then you can decide whether to buy the standard or the Pro edition. Users of earlier versions of OmniFocus for iOS get a 50% discount. That's a great deal. I want to tell you about some of the things that are new in OmniFocus 3. First off are tags. Tags are a powerful organizational tool. You can make as many of them as you want, and they can be whatever you want. You can have a tag for people in your life, your energy level, priorities, locations, you name it. Whatever you can think of, it can be a tag. The forecast view now shows your tasks and calendar events in order, so you can better see what's coming up and adjust your day accordingly. With the Pro version, you can also set a special tag so that certain items always show up today. OmniFocus 3 also features enhanced repeating tasks that are easier than ever to set up, and they work with real-life examples, like the first weekday of every month. The Omni Group has also brought batch editing from the Mac to iOS. Now you can set due dates, tags, and other data on multiple tasks all at one time. There's new flexibility with inspectors too. You can customize inspectors so that they only show the features that you use and not the ones that you don't. You can also reorder those features so they're exactly where you want them. Get the most out of OmniFocus by reading their ever-growing list of articles and customer stories on Inside OmniFocus. We'll have a link in the show notes. And if you ever need help, just contact them by email or give them a call. They're there to help you. Download OmniFocus 3 today and accomplish more every day. Thanks again to OmniFocus for supporting the show.
I want to mention how and I think I've told this story before, but just how the whole Mac Stories thing came to be. This was actually the topic of my talk at the Release Notes conference last year in October 2017. So Mac Stories started as a way for me to talk about Mac apps because I didn't have an iPhone back then. So I was just I dropped out of university. I thought I was gonna study philosophy in university, and that didn't work out. That was a terrible idea. And I was 19 at that point, and then I found this job at a physical eBay store, one of those places where people would go in and bring you stuff to sell online because they didn't know how to create a listing on eBay, or they didn't want to deal with computers. This was 2008, 2009. So
Okay.
the whole social network thing didn't really exist, and smartphones were still relatively new, especially in Italy. The iPhone wasn't even available yet. I think the original iPhone didn't launch, and then we got the iPhone 3G in 2008, and the App Store was just like a couple of months old. And I didn't have an iPhone, but I was working at this eBay store, and I was saving money, and eventually I bought a MacBook. I bought a MacBook because I was just when I was supposed to do my job, I was just wasting time on these forum boards. My boss at the time, he was the kind of guy that loved to just waste money on stupid things. And he bought a couple of iPhones imported from the United States. And he tasked me with the job of trying to figure out how to unlock the phone. So I started, I had the perfect excuse to spend more times on these forums. And I got interested in the whole Apple news and rumors scene. And I realized that I wanted to buy a Mac first. So I bought a MacBook. And I realized also that I love to try new apps and find the best app for a specific feature, which sort of shaped my strategy for app reviews later on, my obsession for trying to understand an app, what it can do, what it cannot do. And so with the MacBook and with the research that I did on the phone, I on the iPhone, I was really starting to get into the talking with other people about Apple stuff, following Apple news. And that's when I discovered they're in Fireball and Mac rumors. I'm pretty sure that 9 to 5 Mac didn't exist back then, or if it existed, it was a really small site. And eventually my boss decided that he didn't want the iPhone anymore, so he gave me his iPhone. And I got an original iPhone, despite the fact that it was not available in Italy. I unlocked the iPhone using one of the systems at the time. I remember that was before the App Store. And there was something called...
It wasn't Cydia, was it?
It wasn't Cydia. It wasn't. That was before the time of Cydia and the jailbreak. So there was something called, I think, the Zebri iPhone Unlock. And then there was something called Installer, which was this, I remember the blue icon. And Installer was like Cydia before Cydia, and sort of like the App Store before the App Store. It allowed you to install native software and native tweaks on an unlocked phone. It was a whole deal and a whole process. And eventually the App Store launched and I got an iPhone 3G. And AppStories, when I got the iPhone 3G, actually, I think I moved directly from the original iPhone to the 3GS in 2009. And that's when I launched the AppStories with a heavy focus on Mac apps, because that was my thing. I wanted to talk about Mac apps. And I remember writing reviews of email clients, of alternative browsers. Actually, I think the first real post on AppStories, if you scroll all the way back to all the pages on the site, you reach the very last page, you will see the first post from April 20, 2009. It's about Stainless and Cruise, two alternative browsers for the Mac.
What are those?
They're like
That's great.
I think they used to be like two custom WebKit browsers, something like that.
Yeah, there used to be a lot more of those.
There used to be a lot of those. So at the time, my main focus was Mac software. And with my terrible English, at first I was writing articles and posts in two languages. So I would write in English and then I would rewrite the same article in Italian. And there was a plugin on the site with a little with a flag selector that allowed you to choose the version of the article that you wanted to read.
Sure.
It was a terrible UI, terrible system. And eventually I just moved to English. And I needed
also a lot of work.
Oh man, it was so much. And then I got the iPhone 3GS in July 2009. And I remember the day that I bought the 3GS with my parents and my girlfriend. We went into the store, and I think my mom bought me the 3GS as a early birthday gift, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I remember in setting up the 3GS and just being amazed at how much faster it was than my original iPhone, because I never got the 3G. And I remember that a few months later, I started being obsessed with trying all the iPhone apps that I could try. And so I remember one of my first memories of wondering how it was possible to create something so beautiful on a phone. One of the early versions of Twitterific from the Icon Factory. I think the design was done maybe by Louis Mantia or David Laneham, or probably both of them. They were working at the Icon Factory back then, and it was so beautiful. It was the version with all the dark colors and the pre iOS 7 style, but it was so beautiful. And I remember I was playing with it on a Sunday, I think, and I was like, man, I really need to start writing more about iPhone apps. And so I eventually, over time, thanks to the App Store, Mac Stories transformed in the course of a couple of years from a website that was very much Mac heavy to mostly iOS stuff. And starting with iPhone apps, and then of course in 2010 the iPad came out, but I wasn't obsessed with the iPad, with the original iPad back then, as much as I was with the, as much as I am with the iPad now. But I wrote so many iPhone app reviews starting in late 2009 and especially beginning in 2010. The iPhone and the App Store really changed my career in terms of the things that I wanted to write about and the developers that I got to know. And I honestly believe that I don't know where I would be today without the App Store. I don't know if I would still be doing Mac stories if it was just about Mac stuff. So in a way, I'm not a developer, but the App Store allowed me to do what I didn't know at the time that I would love what I was doing. It just sort of happened, and it just sort of I found my path as I was walking down a different path in a way. I realized that I wanted to do something different, and the App Store enabled me to do that.
Yeah, I feel very similarly about the App Store, especially. I mean, I have an app called Blink, and I wrote that while I was still a lawyer. And I remember the day that I launched it, I actually launched it from the train into the city. And that was a very exciting day. I didn't do much work that day, I will admit. And when I came home, I remember very vividly sitting on the front steps and thinking, you know what? This is it. I'm done. I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to find a way to do something different, because it was something about the experience of creating something that was useful to other people, that was out there and anybody in the world could buy it. It didn't lead to great wealth or riches or anything. It was a moderately successful app, and I still maintained, but it's not my main thing now. But had I not built that app and really gotten to know you, I wouldn't be doing Mac Stories now either. So it's a similar thing where it's like, I wasn't really sure where it was going to lead. I knew that app development probably wasn't where I was going to end up, but it was kind of the first step down that path that led me to what I'm doing today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have so many little stories about apps that I associate with specific periods and moments in my life. I remember there's this story that I'm not sure I ever shared publicly, of the day that I was supposed to start chemotherapy years ago in January 2012, I think. So that would be over 6 years ago. Paul Haddad from Tapbots, he knew that I was starting chemo that day. And so Paul and Mark decided to send me an super early version of Tweetbot for iPad to play with and spend some time, to be distracted as I was starting treatments. And they were so nice, and I appreciated that gesture so much. And for context, Tweetbot at the time, it was an iPhone-only app, I think.
Right.
And so many people were waiting for an iPad version, because the iPad came out in 2010, and there was no Tweetbot for iPad. And so I remember getting that first version with the original design, and I was so happy because they were like, here, don't think about what you need to do. Just play around with the beta, with the alpha. Actually, it was an alpha, and let us know what you think. And that was such an incredible gesture. And then later in 2012, when I was wrapping up treatments, thankfully, I think I was doing radiotherapy at that point. Ole Zorn, the creator of Pythonista, I remember one day, because we've been talking about ways to have the engine of Pythonista used in different ways. One day I was driving to the city, to the hospital where I was doing treatments with my girlfriend, and Ole sends me this message, and it's like, so remember that idea of trying to adapt Pythonista to something else. I have this super early version of this text editor that I built, that it's got Python actions and automation stuff built in, and it's sort of like a cross between Pythonista and BB Edit and Sublime Text. And I think I'm gonna call it editorial, and I want you to play with it. And that was November 2012. An editorial, of course, launched in on August, I think, 2013. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I had been testing editorial for over 6 months, well over 6 months, like something like 9 months actually. And I wrote a book about it. I had this incredibly detailed. Honestly, it's still one of the reviews that I'm most proud of. Up on the site that I later turned into an interactive iBook. These memories that I have all go back to the fact that it's the App Store that allowed these developers to know me and allowed me to know these developers, and eventually you and all the Relay FM family also, in a way. And there was this final little story that I wanted to share because I think it's kind of funny given how things have grown. It was 4 years ago in January, I think, January or February 2014. And I get this tweet or this email from this kid named Ari. And it's like, hey, Federico, we have this app with this concept that it's like a small automator for iOS, and it's called Workflow. And so I take a look at this video. These three kids, they were like 15 or 16 or something. They're super young.
They were really young. They weren't even in college yet. Yeah.
And they're showing this demo of this automator-like UI of workflows, doing things in sequentially, like multiple actions and crazy stuff, like turn on the flashlight and have a conditional block or a repeat block. And I was like, there's no way this is. First of all, I thought this is fake.
So did I. I saw it on Twitter. I saw it on Twitter, and I thought, this is totally fake.
I thought my first reaction was this is fake, and then I thought this is never gonna get approved, even if it's real. Because I got in touch with them, I was like, "Is this for real?" And they were like, "Yeah, this is totally real. We want to make this an app." Few months pass, and I think it's July, and this Ari kid gets back in touch with me, and he sends me an email. It's like, "You remember that workflow demo that we showed you months ago? Well, this is actually now a beta of an app that we want you to play with." I was like, "Sure, let's see what you guys have built." And a few times in my career, I've been blown away by something, by an app or by a piece of hardware. And Workflow, like editorial, was one of those times when the moment that as soon as I played with it for like 2 minutes, I thought, this is it. This is going to be a big deal. And for example, as a quick aside, Instagram is one of these moments. I was in the original beta of Instagram. I think I'm user number 32 or something of Instagram. Oh, wow. I was talking to the guys, to Mike Krieger, the co-founder of Instagram, before he came out. And actually, if you go back and look for my story called, I think Instagram is a new social camera paradigm or something like that. That was published on the day that Instagram launched because I was in the beta, I had the embargo and everything. And the moment that I played the Instagram, I thought, this is it. This is how we're going to share photos on our phones going forward. And Workflow, I had the same reaction. I thought, this is just incredible. What these kids have built is just, I cannot believe what they have here. And so I get back in touch with them, and we spent the majority of July and August talking about features of the app, and I'm sending feedback, and they were hoping to get Workflow done in August. But the problem was that Apple started rejecting Workflow. It was supposed to be launching in late August or early September, and Apple kept rejecting Workflow for some reason. And Workflow launched in December. It was approved in late November or early December, I think. And despite the fact that it launched basically at the end of the year, Workflow ended up being my app of the year in my annual roundup. And people thought that was funny, but then I had this very simple and obvious explanation in the story that said, I've been playing with this for 6 months, right, but Apple kept rejecting it. So this is my app of the year because I've actually been using it for like 5 months or 6 months. It's not my fault that it just launched now.
Yeah, and the rest of the story, obviously. Workflow acquired by Apple, and now we're in a new era with shortcuts coming down the road. It's quite an amazing story. Yeah, I think that those sorts of stories, Federico, are exactly what I think is most important to me, and also most special about Mac Stories and what we try to do on AppStories, which is there's more to it than just the apps themselves. They're tools, and they're fun to play with. But there's lots of interesting stories behind them. The people, the craftsmanship, the effort and the thought and really the art that goes into creating these apps.
Yeah.
I think that's it for today. We've got a lot of episodes in the can, and they're coming out each day for the rest of the week. So keep on looking out for them on MacStories. You can find Federico on Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you tomorrow, Federico.
Ciao, John.